welcome to today's SME Growth Cohort session. It's the 2nd of July, and on today's agenda we have the Tech News Bulletin, which is from the British Chamber of Commerce, most SMEs still struggling to embrace AI, followed by our first ever teardown session where Hugh David will be performing a positioning review of Sophie Wright's fractional CFO agency. 43% of firms have no plans to use AI technology, and that seems really high to me. I think a chunk of that 43% will either change their mind or find that they're going to struggle to compete, or they'll have a burnt out workforce trying to keep up with other AI enabled businesses. Customer facing businesses, the B2C firms, are even less likely to adopt AI, with 50% stating that they have no plans to use this technology. And I find that absolutely mind-blowing. Customer service is one of the most obvious use cases for deploying Gen AI and agentic workflows. And I think that stat is motivated by fear that businesses will lose customers if they replace human contact with AI agents. Which on the face of it sounds like a reasonable position, but I think that misses the point, because the goal is to find those areas where humans add little value, or where AI agents can add more value to the customer to free up more time to focus on establishing stronger customer relationships. And I've got to say on that, I think waiting for direct action by the government to help SMEs adopt AI is terrible advice. I think you'd be waiting way too long for that. My personal advice is start small, copy others, see what works, double down on that and expand, build confidence, nominate an AI champion, upskill them, upskill others, define an AI usage policy that encourages your team to experiment, whilst also letting them know where the boundaries are, and just do it. In today's teardown, Hugh David of Bright Collie is going to review the brand positioning of Sophie Wright's fractional CFO agency, Wright CFO.
By understanding really connections with the audience, the value that you can present them, what your competitors are doing now, not just to mimic, but kind of knowing what their strengths are, knowing what their weaknesses are, how you've got an area of difference. By spending time there and really kind of formulating an answer and giving some rules and some frameworks to work to, what that does is that influences things like your voice. It influences things like the business name. So the business name really should be grounded by the positioning. Any messaging, any kind of stories that you want to tell. And then that influences what people see on the surface, which is typically the visual identity and anything that you're doing from an outbound and whatnot. So that for us is the pillar of positioning. It is about kind of planting a flag on a hill and kind of owning something and being confident. What happens, unfortunately, a trait is that, and this is very, very common, is that we don't adopt a positioning and stick to it for long enough. So if we can't see your points of difference, whether that's in your messaging or in the way that you turn up, effectively you're just commoditizing and people will choose on price. The observation here is that the messaging is quite functional and it's kind of feature driven, as opposed to maybe being a little bit more kind of emotive and actually these are the problem solutions. Avis did this as they had a campaign that ran from the 60s, which was "We are the number two." And then every piece of messaging and everything they put out was why you should choose us, because we're the second best. And in fact, that means you're getting better service, you're getting better treatment and whatnot. And that's a very, very successful campaign. There's lots of brands that kind of mimic that by going at a direct competitor.
That's very interesting, because I've had people call me interested in our services and say, we Googled fractional CFOs, CFO Center always comes up top, and they looked at some of the sponsored ones and thought these look a bit too big and corporate, and we're nervous about our first fractional CFO hire, and you look personable, so we called you. And that has been I can relate to that.
So every piece of content is geared at that kind of audience pain point, but they've done a good job of defining the audience before then kind of filtering and running that content. And this is again the bravery part of the positioning. People think braves mean we've got to make these big, bold, risky bets. Actually, sometimes you've just got to be brave by going, this is what we're going to stick to, and kind of not get distracted by everything else. So I would say you choose one, but you pick three strong kind of pillars to support that positioning. If you want referrals, if you want partnerships, people kind of need to know what you deliver. And as soon as they kind of go, I don't actually know what they stand for, I don't actually know what their kind of core offer is, or that real sweet spot, that's where your positioning starts to weaken. I'm on LinkedIn, so just Hugh David on LinkedIn, and the agency is Bright Collie.
So you can go to the website, writecfo.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, Sophie Wright.